You spent good money on a surround sound system, you mounted those rear speakers on the back wall behind your couch, and yet something still feels off. The sound doesn't wrap around you. Effects feel disconnected. You can hear exactly where the speakers are, and instead of feeling like you're inside the movie, you feel like you're just sitting in a room with speakers pointed at your head. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The way most people place their rear speakers is completely wrong, and it's quietly destroying the surround sound experience they paid for. The fix isn't expensive. You don't need new speakers or a new receiver. You just need to move what you already have into the right position. Today I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Before we get into it, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like so more people can fix their setups too. And drop a comment below telling me what surround sound system you're running right now and what problem you keep running into. Let's get into it. The core problem most people don't know about? Let's start with the fundamental mistake, because once you understand why it's wrong, everything else will make sense. The most common setup mistake is this. Someone buys a 5.1 or 7.1 system, mounts both rear speakers directly on the back wall behind the couch, and calls it done. It seems logical, right? Surround sound, speakers surround you, put them all around the room. But this thinking ignores how surround sound is actually designed to work, and it creates what audio engineers call a hole in the sound field. Here's an analogy that makes this clear. Imagine you're standing in the center of a clock face. The TV is at 12 o'clock. Your left and right front speakers are at roughly 10 and 2. Now, if you mount your surround speakers directly behind you at 6 o'clock, you've created a massive gap in coverage between 2 o'clock and 6, and between 10 o'clock and 6 on the other side. Sound effects that are supposed to travel smoothly from the front, around the sides, and behind you will instead jump awkwardly from the front speakers to the back. That seamless, cinematic wraparound effect collapses completely, and what you're left with is a system that sounds like two separate audio zones rather than one cohesive sound field. 5.1 versus 7.1. They are not the same. This is where a lot of people get confused, and the confusion leads directly to wrong placement. In a 5.1 system, the two surround speakers are not rear speakers at all. They are side speakers. The entire 5.1 surround mix is designed and engineered with the assumption that those two channels will be positioned at roughly 90 to 110 degrees from the center front. That means they should be sitting almost directly to your left and right, or just slightly behind your seated position. Not on the back wall, not pointing at the back of your head, to your sides. When you put 5.1 surrounds on the back wall, you're placing them at about 180 degrees, which is exactly where the mix wasn't designed for. Ambient sounds, panning effects, environmental audio, all of it was mixed assuming speakers would be at your sides. When those speakers are behind you instead, everything sounds wrong because the sound isn't coming from where the mix intended. You're essentially listening to the movie in a layout the audio engineers never accounted for. 7.1 is a different story. In this system, you have 4 surround speakers, 2 side surrounds, and 2 rear speakers. The side surrounds still go at 90 to 110 degrees, exactly like a 5.1 setup. The rear speakers, sometimes called surround back speakers, go behind you at roughly 135 to 150 degrees. If you go back to the clock analogy, that puts the rear speakers at around 4:30 and 7:30. Not at 6 o'clock on the back wall. They're angled behind you, not flat against the wall pointing straight forward. This distinction matters enormously, and most people who own 7.1 systems get this wrong by placing all 4 speakers on the back wall instead of separating the sides from the rears. The height problem that nobody talks about? Now let's talk about height, because this is the second major variable where people go wrong. The most common instinct is to mount speakers as high as possible, usually near the ceiling, because it keeps them out of the way and makes the room look cleaner. But mounting surround speakers near the ceiling creates a completely different problem. When sound comes from above rather than from beside you, your brain processes it differently. Instead of feeling surrounded by audio, you feel like the sound is raining down on you, and that makes the speaker location obvious. One of the goals of a well-set-up surround system is to make the speakers disappear, where you feel the sound but can't pinpoint where it's coming from. Ceiling height placement destroys that effect instantly. The correct approach is to measure the height of your ears while you're sitting in your main listening seat. That distance from the floor to your ears, usually somewhere between 3 and 4 feet, is your baseline. For a 5.1 system, your side surrounds should be at that ear level or up to about 1 to 2 feet above it. That slight elevation helps the sound feel more enveloping and diffuse rather than coming from an obvious point source. For 7.1 rear speakers, you can go a little higher, up to about 2 to 3 feet above ear level, because those speakers are behind you and a bit more elevation helps them blend without being too directional. But never go all the way to the ceiling. The moment sound starts coming from above rather than around you, the immersion breaks. The distance factor and why symmetry matters, here's something that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The distance between your surround speakers and your listening seat affects the experience just as much as the angle and height. Too close, and the speakers feel intrusive and obvious. Too far, and they feel disconnected, like they're playing in a different room. For most setups in a normal living room or dedicated home theater, the sweet spot for surround speakers is roughly 6 to 10 feet from the main listening seat. In a smaller room, 6 to 8 feet gives you an intimate, immersive feel. In a medium to large room, 8 to 10 feet creates a more spacious sound field. If you're in a massive dedicated theater room, you might go up to 12 feet, but beyond that, the surrounds start to feel disconnected and the effect weakens. Symmetry is equally critical. Both surround speakers on the same channel pair need to be at the exact same angle, the exact same height, and ideally the same distance from the seat. If your left surround is at 95 degrees and your right is at 115 degrees, the sound field will be lopsided. Effects that pan from left to right will feel unbalanced. The whole soundstage will pull to one side. This sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but you'd be surprised how many people eyeball their speaker positions and end up with one slightly higher or further back than the other. Take the time to measure both sides carefully. It makes a real difference. The 5 most common mistakes. Now let's go through the specific mistakes that show up over and over again, because naming them clearly makes them easier to avoid. The first is mounting 5.1 surrounds directly on the back wall at 180 degrees, which we've covered in depth. The second is using the same back wall placement for 7.1 rear speakers, but skipping the angled positioning. So all 4 speakers end up in a cluster behind the couch instead of being spread across the sides and rear. The third is mounting at ceiling height and losing the immersive envelopment effect. The fourth is placing speakers in corners. Corners concentrate bass and create uneven, muddy sound that no amount of receiver calibration can fully fix. The fifth is pointing surround speakers directly at your head. Monopole speakers, which are the standard single driver speakers most people own, should be aimed slightly toward the side walls or angled slightly behind your position rather than aimed straight at your ears. When they point directly at you, the speaker location becomes too obvious and the effect collapses. How to fix it step by step? Let's walk through exactly how to correct your setup right now. The first thing to do is identify what system you actually have. If you have 5 speakers plus a subwoofer, you have 5.1 and your 2 surround speakers are side speakers. Move them to the sides of your seating position at 90 to 110 degrees and at ear level or slightly above. If you have 7 speakers plus a subwoofer, keep the side surrounds where they are at 90 to 110 degrees and move the rear speakers to 135 to 150 degrees behind you, angled inward toward the listening position with a bit more height than the side surrounds. Once the angles are right, check the height on both sides with a tape measure. Make sure both speakers are at the same height. If you're using wall mounts, make sure they're rated for the weight of your speakers and that they allow you to tilt and angle the speakers toward the listening position. If you can't mount at the right height because of walls or furniture, floor stands are a completely valid solution and often work better anyway because you can adjust the position without drilling new holes. After everything is repositioned, Angle monopole speakers slightly toward the sidewalls rather than directly at your head. This creates a more diffuse room-filling sound. Finally, run your receiver's auto-calibration system after you've moved everything. Odyssey, Yipao, Macaque, or whatever your receiver uses, these tools measure speaker distance, level, and sometimes frequency response from your listening position. But they only work well if the speakers are in the right physical position first. Auto-calibration is not a substitute for correct placement. It's a fine-tuning step that works on top of correct placement. Get the positions right first, then let the receiver do its job. How to test if you got it right? Once you've made the changes, here's a simple test to know whether your placement is correct. Put on a scene with strong surround content. Something with rain, a helicopter flyover, a crowd, or a chase sequence with sound moving in multiple directions. Sit in your main listening seat, close your eyes, and just listen. You should not be able to pinpoint where the individual speakers are. The sound should feel like it's coming from the space around you, not from two specific spots on the wall. If you can still clearly locate the speakers, try angling them slightly more toward the sidewalls and see if that helps diffuse the sound better. If effects feel disconnected or there's a gap where sound seems to disappear between the front and rear, your angles might still be off and the surrounds need to move forward, closer to the 90 to 110 degree position. A perfectly placed surround system feels invisible. You stop thinking about the speakers and start thinking about the movie. That's the goal, and it's completely achievable with the speakers you already own. Closing and final call to action, here's the bottom line. Rear speaker placement isn't about filling your room with speakers. It's about placing them precisely so they create a smooth, continuous sound field around your listening position. In a 5.1 system, those surrounds belong at your sides. In 7.1, the sides stay at the sides and the rears go behind you at an angle, not flat against the back wall. Height matters, distance matters, symmetry matters, and aiming matters. Get these 4 things right and your system will sound like a completely different setup without spending a single extra dollar. If this video gave you a clear fix for your setup, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are struggling with the same problem. Drop a comment below telling me what changes you made and whether it improved your sound. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do because we've got more home theater content, speaker guides, and audio tips coming very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.